All right, Case.
All right.
I think we're good. Well, thank you, Casey Campbell, for being this is the last episode of what I'm calling a season. This is the 10th episode, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to have you here. You were always on my list because when this was a podcast, you read a book for that, which was a crazy book. Did you finish that book?
Joseph Campbell. Yeah, no, I have not finished
it. Was tough, dude.
It's super heavy reading.
Yeah. Well, his other book, which I had read, and I thought this one was going to be about the same, was called The Power of Myth.
The Power of Myth, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
what I was more familiar with.
Yeah. So you get this other book, the one, The Thousand Faces or whatever, and you were probably reading it when I was, and I'm like, this is dense. This is heavy.
It is,
crazy.
Dude. It's dense for sure.
So we never got around to that just because, man, that beast. It was before we could really do this method, and I was having people at my house to do the meetings, and they were lasting, 3+. I mean, the podcasts were like 3.5 hours long. I did 4 of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then just set up. It was a day-long procedure, and then we were all way drunk at the end.
Sure.
Ruined the day,
as these things are wont to do.
Exactly. So never got around to it. So yeah, you've always been a go-to, so I appreciate that.
Oh man, my pleasure, dude. I'm glad to be on.
All right, well, I'm going to take a second. I'm going to let you, I'm going to sit back and relax because this is going to be be one. What is introduce yourself for me, Case?
Oh, all right. Well, I'm Casey Campbell, a musician, entertainer of sorts. That's what I've been doing full time for the last, I don't know, several years now. I'm going on about almost 10 years, just full time musician, side hustler kind of thing, play in a couple different bands these days, Buffalo Wabs and the Price Hill Hustle. I'm a Cincinnati transplant, but I've been around for almost 20 years now. I moved up right out of college for a job, and I meant to stay for a year, and so there you have it. You'll have those things happen. But now I'm married and living outside of Lebanon, Ohio. With my wife's grandparents' property that we bought. We bought some family land of hers, and so we're up here with our 2 dogs, one of which just had surgery today. So I'm actually sitting here holding his hand so he won't act up right now. And cool. But yeah, that's me. It's
you are everywhere I look is Casey Campbell, right? I mean, that's a good thing, man. I mean, you're doing videos, you're doing the Springer podcast, right?
Yep. I'm the musical director for Jerry Springer's podcast, and
you have your band, you have your music, and then you have, you've always been doing stuff with the Reds, right? You sang a couple times with the Reds.
Sing down at the Red Stadium. Got to sing at the NASCAR race about 3 years ago. The day after I sang at Bernie Sanders' healthcare rally. Right. That was the oddest 2 days I've ever had.
From Bernie to NASCAR. Right.
I mean, you can't go from one extreme to another. Hey,
but they're coming closer right now, right? Like we haven't seen. Isn't that crazy?
Whoever thought NASCAR would be on our side right now.
Exactly. It's crazy. And then there was something else. And then of course the beard. You help run the.
Yep. I'm one of the directors. I know. I saw that. I appreciate the sportage there. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
One of the directors for the Whispering Beard Folkfestival.
So is that? Of course, it's not going to be on this year, right? It's already canceled.
Well, we're actually getting close to making announcements about what we're going to be doing. As the beard has run for the last 13 years. We're just not going to be able to do the same kind of event, but we are working on some things that we're going to be letting out actually really soon. So
nice, great, that's good to hear. It's one of my favorite day, that favorite weekend of the year for a long time.
I tell you, it's quite the time.
Yeah. All right, so Casey and I read this bad boy. It is called The Mayor of MacDougal Street by Dave Van Ronk with Elijah Wood, and I'm going to just take a quick second to read the back of it. Dave Van Ronk, 1936 to 2002, was one of the founding figures of the 1960s folk revival. He was far more than that, a pioneer of modern acoustic blues, a fine songwriter and arranger, a powerful singer, and one of the most influential guitarists of the 60s. He was also a marvelous storyteller, a peerless musician, historian, and one of the most quotable figures of the Village scene, featuring encounters with young stars to be like Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell. The mayor of MacDougal Street is a vivid evocation of a singular time and place, a feast not only for fans of folk and blues, but also anyone interested in the music, politics, and spirit of revolutionary period in American culture. So have you read this before I threw it your way?
No. It's always sort of been one that I've floated around, and I've seen and read passages of it just from trying to learn a little bit about Dave Van Ronk many years ago, but I never actually read the book. And I've not seen Inside Llewyn Davis either.
No way.
Yeah,
that's your
still
homework.
Not seen that. I know.
Do you have Amazon Prime?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be talking then, because man, I'll tell you. First of all, how did Ian Matthew get the cover for this? Right?
Hilarious. That is straight up Ian Matthew. Look at that.
Isn't that funny?
Funny.
I'll tell you, because I'll have to touch base with you, because it's I don't know, from Dave Van Ronk from his book, and he wrote here, he seems like a pretty likable guy. You can tell he's probably stubborn or whatever, but when you watch Inside Llewyn Davis, he's not a very likable character. It's not. I guess they're saying it's not really him. It's pulled from this book, and I guess it's supposed to be a bunch of people lumped in one, but I think essentially it's him. So I'd recommend anybody to watch that movie. But definitely, what it is I think they just take a couple little of these stories and toss them in there for, mix it up. But definitely, if you didn't know, I don't know if I could compare the two. I don't know if I would have been able to go, oh, that's from this book, because it's definitely not made right from it, not even close. So what surprised you about? Let's start out in the beginning. What surprised me most is that the Greenwich Village, I didn't know it started in the 40s and 50s. I don't know why I never thought about it, but that early revival got going around then,
Yeah, for some reason, I guess it's the story that gets painted with the emergence of Bob Dylan,
Yep.
And so that's
who I was looking for the whole book when I first was going to read it, right?
And so that's happening at 64, 65 is when that he really takes off. I think he moved there in 61, they said.
Right.
So I think that's just the romanticized portion of Greenwich Village,
Right.
I didn't realize that it happened, especially like through like the early 50s and mid 50s, I guess, we're 54, 56. And the shape that like McCarthyism and that like Eisenhower America, I like the influence that had on Greenwich Village and stuff, I found really interesting.
Those guys were so political. I mean, the amount of communism that, is thrown in there. I knew that Woody and Pete Seeger, not Woody as much, but Pete Seeger, I knew, maybe he had a card, but I didn't know how much that was really a part of that scene. And it's so hard to, you say the word communism today and everybody's got all these connotations.
Oh yeah, they freak out. Yeah,
exactly. It's just more of a, they're looking for a different way after World War II. They didn't know USSR hasn't become the USSR that we know it today. Yeah. Right. So they're still waiting. They were all, once they saw who Stalin really was, everybody was like, oh shit. Yeah.
Correct.
We're not
people,
this.
Yeah. People tend to forget that they were an ally in World War II. And so, people who started looking at the Communist Party, especially after, like you said, at the end of World War II, who just kind of didn't buy into the, cookie cutter, go get a job and earn your pension kind of life. And some disillusioned and some, just maybe for other reasons, but they started drifting to communism. But again, that was from an allied nation until, the Cold War hit, which obviously that just changed everything. And then the Red Scare and the mentions that they make about like the blacklists and some of the stories, some of the little tidbits of the blacklist. Yep. God,
amazing.
It is, but you know, like with the kind of current climate we're in right now, I can absolutely see how those things unfold, because if you give someone the power on the national level to put that kind of scare into people, where, you know, artists are being specifically questioned because of free thinking and this and that and that. I mean, those are dangerous things, you know.
Oh, you can I think you're right. I think 10 years ago when I was talking about this as a student, or, you know, not a student, but before I could really see it in fruition, you'd be like, man, how does society allow these things to happen?
Mm-hmm.
But now it's a lot easier to understand how.
It's like, oh, this is how.
Yeah, exactly. As a teacher, I have to you know, I speak up a lot online, but I also have to have a line because.
Well, sure.
Yeah. And there, you know, I can't be totally saying everything I believe, because that they have a lot of power. Society has a lot of power, and
yes, they
can point you in that direction they want you to be in. But I think it also Facebook also does the opposite, though, or in society, is that you find a lot more allies too. You know, whereas
that's the truth. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of, you know, that's the dispersion of information, the dispersion of free information, you know. I mean, talking about, you know, and even, you know, Dave Van Ronk mentioning, you know, with some of the guys, I found it really poignant. He was talking about with some of the people that were in, you know, like the line-toting communists or the line-toting socialists, they felt bad if they weren't writing topical, poignant music. Yes. Like they felt like it was almost part of their duty in sharing their information and disseminating that information, you know?
Yeah, I wrote that down as one of our talking points. He said that they were embarrassed to write any personal expression. You could definitely, at one point, you could not write love songs. Yeah, you would not be bringing yourself into this. That would be very selfish.
Exactly right.
When all these things were going on, I think they were talking about the Spanish-American War and people going over to help fight with that. Spanish Civil War, sorry, and then and then World War II coming about. So definitely, if you're just concerned about, which honestly, we're seeing that play out right now. I mean, for, you know, on Facebook with this very pivotal time in our history with Black Lives Matter, you know, I'm a guy that posts my kids every day, and I took a week off. I had to, you know, it was just like same type of feeling, you know. I'm not going to be getting my personal, you know, life, or, hey, I'm playing with my kids while, you know, we're fighting this war against police brutality, you know, and we're going to take this seriously because, you know, people are out marching on the streets.
Kind of the moment demands that, you know, and that's what he sort of mentions through that. And so, but that talk to what we were previously talking about, I think that dispersion of information was really key to these guys, of, like, you know, getting the knowledge out. I mean, you know, he was very, very much a self-described, you know, anarchist, and, you know, all various things throughout his life. But one I also find interesting is through all of that, he also says specifically that he's a materialist. Like, he has no problem with not wanting to be poor, you know.
That surprised me.
And he was, you know, unabashedly. I mean, I think that's the dichotomy, though, of so many people. If you really want to, you know, I think he maybe just had pretty eloquent ways of saying that.
He did, and he's a materialist, though. I think almost today when you say that word materialist too, I'm thinking of Instagrammers showing off their Rolexes, you know. But I think he just was one of those guys where, would he have loved to make it big? Sure, anybody would, like you said. But he was just doing his, like you said, at one point he said, if I could have just lived out in the Merchant Marine. So as a materialist, as far as being comfortable, not having to worry.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Correct. I think materialist in the sense of unabashedly against poverty, you know, like he didn't glorify being poor. You know, he didn't come along as some kind of carpetbagger or hobo or anything like that. Like, he was out to work, like, you know, when he's talking about when he finally starts making even just a modest money just playing music, he's like, we worked damn hard for it because they played 5-6 sets a night. So it's like, you know, he said it's not the he wasn't just wanting to get rich. He just didn't want to be poor, you know.
He didn't want to get ripped off, and which, definitely, and that's why he created the guild, right?
Yeah,
he created the Folks Guild. He's saying, you know, there are people that will pay for free, and they're screwing us over, you know, just like any other job, you know, that wouldn't happen. And you have guys coming into town, these new musicians coming into the Greenwich Village, that'll say, I'll play for free for you, and like scabs in a factory, you're right, going to come in and take your job right from you. And he's saying, we got to come together. We got to work together against this. And still musicians to this day put up with that shit.
100%. Yeah, that hasn't changed. Yeah, that hasn't. I mean, some of those things hasn't changed at all. It's, you know, reading this, I always knew he was political, but, you know, it was interesting to hear, you know, his take on, you know, well, we were just talking about those guys who played political songs. He was actually of the exact opposite camp.
Exactly.
And he's like, you know, my music was my music was my music. My political views were my political views. And so, I found that, you know, very kind of telling of the way he could sort of, you know, separate.
He said nobody was questioning my political views. He said I was active, I was outspoken,
exactly.
but he just looked at his music differently.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly right.
And he said, you know, we as musicians, for some reason, we get screwed. They say, hey, do it for exposure, you know? And he's like, this is my job.
Yeah. But I'm almost lost my train of thought there for a minute. I was like, man, why did I bring up his?
No, I do that. I do that every episode.
But his involvement in forming the union, that was something that was new to me, and I think that's. I find that actually very inspiring kind of work. I find that to be an attitude that we maybe need to start coming back around to, or you know, just banding together a little more to do right for our community in that way, by getting actually active in, you know, trying to change either attitudes or policy, you know, directed towards these people. So
right. Well, people don't realize that there's been a war against unions, you know, since they started, essentially. But really in the last 50 years, and they won. You know, not only did they destroy much of the unions, but they got most average Americans to thinking unions are bad or evil, which is crazy. I worked corporate world for a little bit. I won't say where, but one of our things, we had meetings on how not to get the guys that were down on the factory floor to join unions. And those guys never knew that we were really discussing this and taking a long time and had a strategy to go against it. And this is a battle and a war. You're right that they've won, and they're on the upper hand. We see it with wage differentiation, you know, with
exactly
wealth inequality. And so, I agree 100%. We have to get back to that. There's a lot of things. And I think, gosh, I mean, these last 3 weeks have been really horrible, really bringing me down, but there's some light there that we're seeing come through. And I think that's one of the things that people are going to see is this unity, not only in the streets, but unity in the workplace.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so too. I just want to read this one thing that he said about the union. I know several folk singers who have taken jobs without pay, not quite understanding that aside from its artistic nature, singing in front of an audience is work like any other job, and that even if you do not need or want pay, a great many of their colleagues do, and that in any other line of endeavor, their practices are referred to as scabbing, and its practitioners are known as scabs. But these people are poor as well as we are, and they can't afford to pay us. Oh, wait, but these people are as poor as well and can't afford to pay us, is what the promoter or the club would say. In some cases, this is quite true, but businessmen who have no cash have absolutely no right to employ singers. The entrepreneurs who cop the poverty plea would have their faces laughed at if there weren't so many militant victim types around this field. Dishwashers, waiters, janitors demand wages for their work. They rarely contribute their talents free to help some small businessman line his pockets. Why should you? And that was written by him in a local newspaper. I think it might have been one of his
in the
Yeah, but good point. And I thought that was interesting that, man, we've come not far.
No, we've No, we've not.
No.
We've not. That's the simple answer to that. Yeah. I mean, that's, it's, I mean, honestly, it's depressing in some ways when he's like, and on a good night, we were making $7,500 a person. I'm like, oh man, that's what I make on a decent night.
I was thinking
like
that too.
60 years ago.
Dude, I was thinking that too. I was like,
yeah.
man, you're making pretty good money for 1960s.
Yeah, yeah. And of course he was saying that was on, those occasions weren't a solid thing for him for a long time. So I understand that's like me saying, man, I just went out and I made $500 tonight and I'm kind of jacked about it,
Right.
So I get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you realize that he was trying to help sort of unionize his band of folk singers there, which, and that's another thing we can talk about is sort of the real categorization he gets into about the music and folk singers and this and that and the other. But like his,
we'll talk about that,
yeah, but trying to unionize his little band of folk singers, that it shows, frankly, the kind of power that could wield. I mean, you think about, trying to do that now and, making sure that if you're going out, like if you're a part of the union, then we're going to, you strategize of how to make sure everyone gets a fair wage if they're going out to do their job. I mean, that's what it's all about, bargaining, right?
Does anything like that exist in the music industry right now?
For just independent live musicians, not that I am aware of.
Yeah.
I know for actors and for various,
right, they have it. Right.
You have SAG and AFTRA, which are, and equity for your stage actors. But for like independent musicians, not that I am aware of, unless there's, a large kind of umbrella union, something like the international, like the IWW, which is still around, I believe, technically.
Right. Wobblies.
Yeah, Wobblies are around. I have my little red songbook. That is actually something that predates me reading this book. Is I got hip to the Wobblies several years ago and bought the songbook. And
nice.
It's a fun little tool. But
it is interesting now that we really hash this out, is because even service industry, it's not as much around here, but the service industry has a union for bartenders and there's not one for the independent musicians, which is
not that I'm aware of.
No, but even if it's out there that you don't know about it, and I've never heard anything, then it's not big enough, right?
That's fair. Yeah, you're exactly right.
So, I wanted to bring in this. This will come to your question in a second, but I thought it was really interesting. He talks about the 50s and this Seeger and Guthrie and these guys, and then it slowly changes once people get a hold of Lomax's anthology, and I think Seeger gets that too. And they start to work out, and like you said, you just got the Wobblies folk book. You kind of take these old folk songs, and not only do you want to revive them, but just you playing them in your way is going to change them a little bit. But I thought that was really interesting. Just the talk, one, just how it changes the music, how it moves. But the other thing was, he gets into this argument, or not an argument, because in his mind, there's no argument. Somebody said it was playing covers, right? This music had belonged to them. It's not your music. And he says, no, he calls them interpretations. So I thought that was really interesting, is that you have this whole catalog of music before really recording. So really all you can do is take it, listen to it, and say, wow, this stuff is going to be lost if I don't play it. But some people are saying you're stealing, right? Some people are saying, well, it's not your music. Why even play it?
Yeah, it's that passage. Actually, I was going to pull it because his aside when he mentions that, I just found really telling.
I think it was 207 or 196. One of the two.
I knew I was close.
There's one on 196. There's one of them's the little passage at the bottom. The appendix, I guess, at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then one of them's on, I think, 207.
Yeah, that's the one on 196 when his friend's talking about, she only does covers, and he's like, Louis Armstrong did not do covers, nor did Billie Holiday or Bing Crosby or Frank Sinatra or anything like this.
Or Elvis.
And I love his line though. He said, while none of these people were primarily songwriters, their interpretations were a hell of a lot more original than a lot of the quote original songs being written on the current scene. And I think his musicality is, I knew he was a very accomplished or a very accomplished guitar player, as well as, having written songs, had some great songs and stuff. But I did not realize like the degree of musicality that he had, specifically his traditional jazz self-training and his kind of, his not pigeonholing, but like his being branded as an American blues man. I didn't know that about his, his musical background. Yep. And so his talk about that in the covers, and kind of the idea of singing other people's songs, I thought was just brilliant, because I think just in a practically identical way, that he even says in the book, he says, if you love a song and you don't sing it, and the idea is that you don't sing it, then every great song will die with the person that wrote it. And like, that's an injustice to the idea of what the music is to begin with, and the story is to begin with. I mean, folk music was meant to be passed to person to person to person.
Tradition, what it was, right?
That is it. And and that's, and like, it's funny early in the book when he's kind of hardlining his stance on traditional music and folk music and who's a folk singer, and in fact, like, none of the singers, he's like, none of those guys are folk. That's not folk music, which is funny. And I mean, he's obviously kind of pernicious, like you said earlier. Like he obviously has a little bit of a snark to him in various ways, but I see the argument that he's making there, but yeah, when he's talking about singing other people's music and the interpretation, and that line of like, their musical arrangement and interpretation of someone else's song is just as original as someone else's piece of work, that so many, and I think now, I mean, birthed out of the 60s and that idea of like singer songwriter, and you write your own shit and that's all you do, and you don't sing other people's music. I grew up loving other people's music long before I ever wrote a piece of music.
And that's a new thought. I mean, really, yeah. He's talking about it here, but really the 60s, it
is a new thought.
You look at how many Jimi Hendrix songs, he's doing the Beatles right when they released it,
Mm-hmm.
It was, even though it was maybe coming out here, you don't see it like back then. They were, like he said, he had one song that he thought he did awesome, and then some lady released the song that he did, and his sales went down. She was a number one hit, and it's just funny that right now, even though he was talking about this, he's probably writing this in the or late 90s, so we're now in the culture where you don't do that.
Yeah,
but yeah, he grew up in the culture where that was what you did.
Yeah.
But he has a quote here: "I am absolutely ruthless about this because I have no incentive to pad my repertoire with second-rate material of my own when I could just as easily add some first-rate material by someone else."
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yep.
And it's the truth. I mean, especially being, if you love the American blues, if you love this and that and the other, then there's a catalog that is practically infinite at this point. Right. So to say, just to say that music is almost off limits because you didn't write it, that just, I've always found that idea to be absurd. And to hear him say it, especially given kind of his Puritan stance at various times in his life, to hear him be like, I would much rather play a wonderful collection of other people's music that I actually believe in and can get behind than to write songs just to say I wrote songs. Like, I really appreciated that idea.
Well, and you're introducing music, one that's is good, like you said, that is good stuff that you want to keep going on. Some of the stuff you guys play with your band, Buffalo Wabs and the Price of Hustle. Your Irene. Good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, you guys crushed that. I never knew that song was Lead Belly. You guys introduced that song to me. I love it. And then, you go back and see it's Lead Belly, and I would have never, so many people would not have known that song.
Yeah.
You guys bringing it out and ending a show like, holy shit, this is amazing. This
and
awesome.
What? And we love playing old songs that are the same way. It's like we get excited to share them, but we also take the the very traditional folk approach of we rearrange it. We may write a verse or two. We change out some words. And so every time it's a brand new song, even though it's been passed down by God knows how many people at this point, so.
He gives a good story too. And like you said, how he just was, his talent was doing like what you just talked about, taking the song, making your own kind of arrangement, musicality, maybe adding your own verses. And Dave Van Ronk did it with, I thought it was really surprising was The House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah.
Cause I went back and listened to, an older version, Lead Belly. Same.
It is a situation. Way different song.
Way different. You can tell it's about a prison from Lead Belly. He talks about in the book, like, I figured out it's a prison. Well, Lead Belly pretty much tells you that. But Dave Ronk's arrangement, totally different. Yeah. The chords, and then Dylan took it and then the Animals. But to find out that he was the guy that kind of was the first guy to make those new arrangements and the new lyrics blew my mind.
Yeah.
But I want to do a sidetrack. Have you ever seen, do you watch much Netflix?
Yes.
There was a documentary called The Lion's Share on Netflix. Great documentary.
No, I've not seen that.
So, and this is why I love reading books, because it just changes your whole perception. So what it's about is Pete Seeger and his song Weemaway, The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Oh.
So the documentary goes into this whole like, oh, did you know that this is an old African song that goes back forever? And they go back and trace it, and they make it seem like what Pete did was he brought it back to the United States, and he tweaks it and makes it American. And it almost like Pete's an angel, right? But people that don't know Pete, you're almost like, man, what did he just stole that song?
Like he just stole that song?
Right. Changed it, made it pop. And it's like, well, our whole conversation is what they don't tell you in this documentary is that's what you're supposed to do.
That's folk music. And the thing is that a lot of people, especially through, the turn of the 20th century, they took songs from other people like deliberately, they took it to monetize
if they're still live.
Yeah.
Sure. If you're still live and you're singing it and you're on tour and you're like the white guy can get on the radio because that guy can't.
Because that guy different. Can't. Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. So there was a lot of that going on. So obviously, like some people kind of skewed, I think, the conversation of, oh, well, that's stealing music. Well, I just as you were saying, I mean, with a traditional folk song. If it's a traditional folk song and you give homage to the person that you heard the song from and you change it to make it your own for your place and time, that is the essence of folk music. Right. And so I guess some people will always think of that as stealing.
They won't see it. Well, and there's some overlap too. And Dave even brings it up. There's some overlap where he's talking about, we're listening to this anthology, and in our minds, these guys are long dead.
Yeah, correct.
And it's like, no.
It becomes like a record of the past, and it's like, oh no, man, they're out still living on the farm. I mean,
right, exactly. Yeah. Who was it? It wasn't Lead Belly. No, who was it that was still like? Was it Mississippi John Hurt? That
he was living back home.
But he was just a farmer. He wasn't even consider himself Lily.
He was farming cotton until he got pulled up at like almost 70, I think, when he hit the road again. Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not even a real, I play here and there. I got pulled onto those albums, but that's not really what I do.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is because it feels to us, I mean, I guess to me, it feels like a lifetime ago, but those cuts of Mississippi John Hurt, I think they were recorded in like 28. And he hit the scene again back in like the late 50s. So, it was 30 years difference. And as I'm sure, for Dave Van Ronk, as a 22-year-old, that's longer than he's been alive. So he's like 30 years. Sure. Surely they're dead. And then you find out these guys are still alive and they pop back up on the scene. And it's almost, there is a bit of a reckoning to go on.
He beat him.
Yeah.
Sure. But he had no, these guys knew American culture, knew it better than anybody, knew how they were going to be treated. And I think that's how Mississippi John Hurt was. He's just like, dude, this is how I expected it. I didn't expect to be treated right. And then he beat him in arm wrestling like 3 times in a row.
Yeah, he had a great clip there. He's like, he's been dead for 40 years and he's still probably stronger than I am,
right.
Something like that. But his relationship to the Reverend Gary Davis was something that surprised me as well.
So you know who that is. See,
yes.
Let me say one thing about this book. So many names. And a guy that, I know John Lee Hooker I listened to in high school. I mean, some of these Muddy Waters, I know some of them, but I know, man, so many names.
I can hear you a little bit, but I can't. You're frozen. Oh, the Reverend Gary Davis. Yep. Right. So I've just become familiar with his music over the last, year and a half or so, really. But absolutely love it. And we've actually started doing a Reverend Gary Davis song in the Hustle.
Nice.
So I did not realize the relationship he had with some of these old bluesmen, particularly Reverend Gary Davis. So that was just a surprise, and really entertaining to read.
And he talks about some big guys like Josh White. Have you heard of him? Have you
listened to him? One Meatball.
The way he speaks of him in there is like, he's this main man. He's the one that made it big. And it's like, man, I got to go. I have this list of people I got to go through and listen to because of all, that were right there on the cusp of becoming, obviously Dylan made it out. But then he left some names out that surprised me. There were, with all the names in it, one of my favorite guys that came out of there was Richie Havens. Are you familiar?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. He mentioned Richie Havens in just one little passing quip, and that was it.
Some people say he wrote All Along the Watchtower because Richie performed it, but I think they kind of probably just did it together. I don't know. I've seen both. I've seen interviews where Richie says, hey, yeah, Bob asked if I could have the song, which Bob Dylan did. We saw that with Dave Van Ronk. And then I've seen other interviews with Richie Havens where he's like, this is a Bob Dylan song. And I'm like, maybe he's going to get sued or something. Maybe he had to say it.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
One point I wanted to say is that really stood out to me was this music's political. And one of the parts it talks about how they used it in marches and protests, right? And that they said that this music is what kept them unified, really kind of gave them incentive to go and march and be strong. And I looking at what's going on today in America, and it's like the absence of that is glaring, it's not there at all. There is, there's chanting, justice, whatever, but there's no singing, and he acted like that was an integral part of that time period in every march. What are your thoughts on that? I agree with you. I think that there is an absence of specifically protest written music, Yeah.
I mean, he made a joke about, it almost turned out that, nothing would have come out of the 60s except for protest music if it wouldn't have been for Dylan, and this and that and the other.
Right.
So, it was an obvious, draw to the movement at that point.
But also you'd see, he said he explained it 2 ways. One, you'd see the folk singer on the corner during these protests. And then 2, you'd see the people as a group singing these songs. And it just seems like, when you watch these things, you're almost like something's missing because pretty much they're chanting and then the cops are pushing back or whatever.
Yeah.
You're missing that element.
The group chant, I think, is something that is kind of missing. And why, I don't really know. I think some of it is probably a generational taste, frankly. I mean, with the electronic music and with the popularity of electronic music, the idea of, an a cappella song is perhaps foreign even to some younger people. Sense. It's just, I think maybe the medium is slightly different than obviously, it is very different, but I think just even the musical medium of what people are used to or what people even know or have heard in their lives is just so drastically different at this point. For a 20-year-old, it's very possible some 20-year-olds have never heard, just a giant group of choral singers or something. I mean, that's a possible thing.
But do you think it would make a difference? I really do. As I thought about it, as I read that, I really think that it would make a difference, not just in what they're doing, but I think it would make a difference to people watching.
Yeah, I think, and I think, I've thought a lot about this just personally, and in wanting to try to write music that's a little more timely, and having some ideas that I'm kind of trying to flesh out that are almost my protest songs. I think that maybe that's a way that, as a Caucasian artist, maybe that's a way that I can actually speak in some way. Like this isn't, as many people have kind of talked about through the current movements. I mean, we're talking about now rights for, for gay and lesbian and trans communities, and we're talking about Black Lives Matter and things like that. And in a lot of ways, as a straight white man, these aren't my like chance to lead, you know what I mean? Like it's
right.
I think now we have to find a way to speak within not boundaries, but we need to find a way to speak in a proper channel. And so, as already being a musician, maybe that's one way that I can do it, is I can write a song that's just a big middle finger in my own way, and do my best to spread my word and things like that.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
The other thing I see is what you guys have created. The reason I asked you about this book was I started it, I put it down. A lot of the books that I'm doing for this were books that I started and put down. It gives me a reason to finish them up.
Yeah.
but was obviously because you guys have created a community here. You and there are few other guys. The board of Whispering Beard, it's mainly the guys I'm thinking of, but there are a few others. And what really made me think about was who was it? There's a guy, and he created the Folklore Center, right?
Oh yeah, Izzy.
Izzy Young, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how do you relate like the folk school? Well, it used to be Coffee Parlor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you see that? I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah. Oh, it did for me too. It drew some major parallels, which was interesting to kind of feel out, And I mean, the whole idea behind the folk school, when Catfish told me he had this idea of a shop he wanted to open, it was all about just having a community space,
Right.
And even moving forward now, even though we're not really doing the coffee shop stuff, we're still looking at doing events, and whether there are other places, and it's all about just kind of just this the cultivation of just getting together in community to share information, to share art, to share music, to that was really the idea and sort of the birthing of that. And so to read about the folk center and what was that, the late 50s is when they were
Right.
picking all that up. I mean, it shows, I think it showed me a couple things. It showed me, that space, and that community space in particular is vital for things like that to happen. And that the interaction that breeds, he talks about people that pretty much being a spot you could have your mail forwarded to, so everybody's
Right.
coming in and out like it's a general store. I think those spots are key when you're talking about, social movements and being active within your community. But also it showed me that, a relatively innocuous gesture like opening up a folk center, a bookshop and small little place can have lasting impacts, and so it that was actually really cool to read, and kind of encouraging to know, that these little places can really have lasting meaning. So.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you, I can't tell you how jealous I am of just of you guys, just looking at you guys, the camaraderie, the hanging out there of just music going on, you have classes going on, and I've gone down to a couple shows there, the musicians they bring in, but just to have a community hub, that not a lot of cities or places have, you guys just, you guys are a group. And if you were to write a book about this scene, of the last 10 years, you guys would have as many names as Dave does. I think it's pretty big here. Do you think there's any city like Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, that has the same folk bluegrass culture that we have, Americana culture that we have right now?
Not that, no, I mean, not that I've ever been a part of personally. I know, especially with Cincinnati's reach into Kentucky these days, just as you said, Northern Kentucky, but even just getting down into, Lexington nowadays, and then, further on, I mean, it's kind of as that circle widens, I think Cincinnati is in a perfect geographical spot for all of this, this transection of music and different genres. I mean, you can hit major markets in a fast way. So in like logistically, it's a good place to be, for kind of what, I mean, even Dave's talking about it, like getting on the road is when he knew he had to get out of New York and hit the road to be able to do some stuff. And then he ends up, you go back and you always go back to somewhere. And so, Nashville prides itself on kind of its density, but I think some of the best unsung musicians I've ever met in my life are in Cincinnati. I think the talent is off the fucking chain.
I agree.
I mean, I really do.
Well, would you be here without this scene? Would you be here without it?
No, I never planned on staying. And if it wasn't, when I decided to kind of switch full time into music, it was right around the birth of the Beard, and when Wabs was putting that all together, just because he wanted to throw a festival that he would want to go to, and that's kind of what started that. And from all of that and getting to know people that I've gotten to know, and then opportunities arise from knowing the people that I have. I mean, everything is just kind of compounded on solely, like, I found a niche of musicians that I learned so much from, and I felt like I could contribute in my own way to the community. And from there, we all just had somebody else had a bright idea to do something, and we would do it, and you kind of step in and do it. And
it's an amazing community you guys got.
It's fun. It's just been fun to be a part. I mean, hell, I say it all the time, but it really is, like, I'm honored just to be a part of it. To think I've had anything to do with any of it is just remarkable to me. So I'm just glad to be here. So.
You got so many people that are, from the area. You got the Tillers, you got Arlo McKinley, you got you got most of the Wabs and the Hustle. You got but then you got the Harm Brothers that are moving here from Portland.
Oh yeah.
Who would have thunk? I was a fan of theirs, and then when they decided to pick up and come here, I was like, whoa, that really proved to me what you guys got going on. Not just from perception, but to say, wow, this is strong. This is really
absolutely. I mean, that speaks volumes, and I think also it speaks volumes. You just mentioned like Arlo and the Tillers, and I mean, guys across all genres, but they're people that are from here that have gotten some recognition choose to stay. Maria Corelli. And so, when people choose to stay, I think that also speaks volumes. And then you've got, like you said, the Harm Brothers. Jordan Smart came back from California, and so you get, when you start drawing people in, you hit kind of I think the object is sort of critical mass, and nobody really knows when that is, but you just try to flood it with art, and and we've got the visual art scene is amazing in Cincinnati, and the graphic art scene, and so the confluence of creative types in general, I think, is something that Cincinnati really does have going for it. And I like to think that maybe the city will recognize that and capitalize on that. I know right now there's a lot of other stuff going on, so priorities are shifted, but keeping creative types is it's worthwhile. I mean, it's worthwhile for just the overall health and art and education of the entire city, And
man, I don't know what I would have done with this community with, I have 3 kids, and so I wasn't able to be in the middle of it as much as I would have if I was 15 years younger. I would have, but just to live vicariously and go to shows, I don't know how my life would have been way crazy different just without you guys and what you guys have created there. And there's a lot of us like that. We just appreciate it. And man, it makes this place a better place to be. Definitely.
Thanks, brother. Like I said, I'm just glad to be a part of it.
That's awesome. So there's about 10 other things we could talk about, but I like to keep these at an hour.
Okay.
Got Casey's Venmo up there. Casey's a musician. Obviously, they're not playing out a lot right now. So any help you give, we really appreciate.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
And, hopefully we're going to get these musicians up and playing out so we can see them live, but support them any way you can while you can. Even if this is a YouTube video, if you're not watching live, We appreciate any help you can give. Casey, thank you so much. This was
Mike,
fun.
thank you, brother. Yeah.
And,
thanks for getting me to read this book. I've loved Dave Van Ronk's music, and I'm glad to have finally read this, and it's very entertaining. It's been super fun talking with you.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. And I might get you again someday.
No, I think you should. We'll get back to that Joseph Campbell.
We'll pick a different one.
Very nice.
All right. See you, brother.
All right. We'll see you, man. Take care.